2 p.m. on a Friday, you know what that time means. It means it's time for the 2 p.m. project with Christy Barty. Give them a big round of applause. Hey! Hey, how about that? The studio audience going bananas. We got a great crowd in. Love you guys. Love all of you. Oh, it's thousands of people. I can't count them all. I know it's isolation, but everyone's behind Perspex, so we're all safe. Trust me. Trust me. Not many do, but trust me. Because this is the 2 p.m. project. It's great to have you back again. We're here for another Friday afternoon to help wrap up your week. I hope you've had a good week. Have you had a good week? You have? Oh, that's great. Well, the intent behind our show, if you haven't actually already seen it, is to equip you with the practical, evidence-based tools and techniques that are going to help you navigate through this crazy, crazy world. And I hope as the weeks go by, it's not as crazy, but it's still pretty crazy. This is an interactive show, as hopefully you already know. We are streaming live to YouTube and to Facebook. Hello to all our friends on both those platforms. There will be questions at the end. We've got a couple of great guests here today, and on the side of both YouTube and Facebook, there's an opportunity for you to comment and to give us your thoughts. Ask questions of anyone or any people that you see on this show today. Also, make sure you subscribe to our show. You can receive reminders about the 2 p.m. project in your inbox, magically appearing every Friday through the magic of the interweb into your inbox. We customize this show for businesses. So if you think that this is actually something that would work for your people and your business, we can actually create the show customized for your purposes. I'm sure you would love to see your own musicians here on the 2 p.m. project. We have a brilliant musician here today. I'll introduce him in a sec. It's going to be a big show. We have, as again, hopefully you know if you have been watching, we've been exploring the well-being part of the world in the last few weeks. And last week we looked at managing feelings of being overwhelmed by stuff. There's a lot of stuff to overwhelm us at the moment. Today we're going to flex a little bit. You see what I did there? We're actually going to talk about how COVID-19 is impacting on workplace flexibility. You see, I've made that connection. The 2 p.m. project today looks at ultra flexibility. Really, if someone could write a theme song for me, it'd be really good. It does look a little cheap after 5 weeks of doing it. You get it. But you get it. I hope you get it. I hope I don't look like an idiot up there, do that? No, I don't. Oh, that's good to know. I'm joined today by my interchange colleagues, as always, Gabrielle Harris and Dr. Melissa Giles. Gabrielle, hello. Welcome back to the show. Great to have you here. You're looking golden this afternoon. And Melissa Giles is here as well. Melissa, hello. Welcome to you too. You're looking golden as well. Lovely to have you here. As always, Melissa and Gabrielle will help unpack a new theme each week and how it relates to our world and how it can actually help us navigate through the crazy, crazy world that we're in. We have a special guest speaker here today, and I'm thrilled to have her on board, Professor Anne Bardoel, who is an expert on workplace flexibility. Anne, are you there? Yes, you are there. Hello, welcome. It's going to be so fantastic to have a chat with you this afternoon, Professor Anne Bardoel. And our musical performance today is from the frontman of Sydney band WELTER, ELLIOTT WESTON. What a thrill to have you on the show, my friend. ELLIOTT will be playing towards the end of the hour. You do not want to miss the big lungs of the busking Tasmanian bust out a single tune. But if you're a Sydney resident, you no doubt will know this band, WELTER. It's fantastic. So stick around for the next 60 minutes here on the 2 p.m. project. Here's something pretty special.
Right hand to deadlines. Left foot to home office. Right foot to home school.
Oh, come on.
Left hand to family.
Oh my God. I'm so inflexible. Flexible work arrangements are things that we've been experimenting with for quite some time. Employees have been pushing the idea forward, really just looking to change their working arrangements to better suit the commitments that they have outside of work. This is largely about the when, the where and the how. Changes to the hours, to the pattern and to the location of the work that they actually do. Now, obviously, COVID-19 has come along and completely changed the game, fast-tracking the experiment to the point where we're seeing flexibility like we've never seen before. We never actually expected it, even to the point where there are roles and industries that were previously deemed inflexible. Now, out of necessity, we've had to work this out. However, has enforced flexibility actually changed the way that we think and the way that we trust the people that we work with? These are the big questions we're exploring here today on the 2 p.m. project. Whew. Boy, that twister is for the birds. How flexible are you? Write us in here at the 2 p.m. project. Send a stamped self-addressed... Remember when you used to send a stamped self-addressed envelope? Could someone do that? Send us a stamped self-addressed envelope, 12 Argyle Street, Fitzroy. It'd be awesome. I'm going to bring in Melissa Giles for some real expert thought and intellect into this particular subject. Melissa, I know that this is a subject, flexible working is a subject that's very dear to your heart. How about we go right back to the start? Maybe you could bring us in on what actually we mean by working flexibly.
Yes, Chris, thanks. Yeah, so when we're talking about workplace flexibility, we're talking about those arrangements that allow employees to vary when, where and how they work. So as that definition suggests, there's various types of workplace flexibility. So we see when we vary the when they work, is around that schedule flexibility. So this can be things that like flexi time, where you might vary your start and finish time, or compressed work weeks, where employees work longer periods over shorter number of days, say 4 long days rather than 5 standard days, and part-time schedule, where employees work less than full-time hours. So there's some of those schedule flexibility arrangements that we know. So they allow employees to vary how they distribute their weekly hours over the working week. When you start to vary where you work, we kind of talk about that in terms of location flexibility. So this is where you alter the place that you work. So obviously we see things in that bucket around working from home or working from alternate locations rather than your primary office.
And so, given that this is it's like I was saying in the twister introduction, it's enforced flexibility. It's actually been forced upon us. So what impact has COVID-19 had on workplace flexibility?
Yeah, well, it's really thrown workplace flexibility into the spotlight. It's a topic that's very close to my heart. I did my PhD on workplace flexibility, and it's something we've been talking about for quite a long time. So, but what COVID-19 has done is really put the spotlight on workplace flexibility. And we know only a few years ago from research by the Australian Bureau of Statistics that around a third of adults worked regularly from home. Whereas now, that number would have skyrocketed. So we know a lot of people are working from home out of pure necessity, from the requirements of COVID-19. We also know that people are working more flexible schedules, to accommodate things like children or other commitments that they have. So we know that, people aren't really sticking to those 9 to 5 hours at the moment, but having to work more flexible schedules. And I guess another element that's come out at the moment is we also know that some people, their hours reduced. So many people would have moved actually to a part-time schedule as well. So, it's a state of flexibility that we'd neither planned for nor expected. And it certainly had wide-scale impact.
So that wide-scale impact that you speak about, the big question, I guess, for all of us, we're a business that's actually been promoting flexible working for a long period of time. It's interesting to see that it's actually now we don't really have too much choice. It's here. Do you think the changes to workplace flexibility that we're currently witnessing are going to last beyond the pandemic?
Yeah, there's no doubt that our world of work has changed. It's, a phenomenal scale of change that we're experiencing at the moment. And I think some of that will endure beyond COVID-19. So in many ways, COVID-19 has normalised workplace flexibility, something that many organisations have struggled with to date. So it's become acceptable to work from home. It's become acceptable to work more flexible hours. I think the other interesting element with COVID-19 is that it has actually removed many of the barriers that have prevented more widespread uptake of workplace flexibility. So we know that often technology was a barrier or managers were a barrier, but we know a lot of those things have been removed out of pure necessity in terms of organisations needing employees to work from home. So tech has been put in place. It hasn't been the manager's decision for people to work more flexibly. And we know it's been a steep learning curve for everyone, one that might not have happened without COVID-19. I think it is important for us to remember that this was forced upon organisations, but it has been a learning opportunity. So I think organisations have been able to trial new approaches to working as a consequence of people working from home. So I think that, it has shifted our thinking. It's made workplace flexibility more widespread amongst employees. And my expectation is that that will continue. And we've already seen some examples of that where organisations are talking about the fact that, post-COVID-19, they may well continue on with some of these arrangements given that they've seen the benefits of it.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating time, and I think it will be even more fascinating for the likes of yourself and Anne, who we're going to speak to in a minute, who have actually been studying this for some time. The pre- and the post-coronavirus impact of this is going to be quite extraordinary. So thank you, Dr. Melissa Giles. We'll come back to you in a minute. I'm going to keep on moving. We do have a jam-packed show here for you today, but I could not get through today without a couple of things I learned this week. The word of the week. Here's the word of the week. I had to write it down just because I wasn't sure whether you knew. Skumped. The word of the week is skumped. Say it. Skumped. I do believe it's a transitive verb for the purists out there. Skumped. Do you know what this is? I hope you haven't been skumped, but a couple of people out there I know have been skumped. Skumped is when you are dumped via Skype. Yeah. Sorry about that. So I hope you haven't been. I haven't been skumped. I don't think Double Leopard's been skumped. That's good. I hope the well-being of our viewers out there is high on our list of priorities. So I hope you haven't been skumped. Use it. There's a new word for you. The joke of the week is this: a man walks into a bar. Lucky bugger. That's the joke of the week. Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on. Gabrielle Harris going to bring... Thank you. Sorry, I forgot you were here, studio audience. That one's for you. Gabrielle Harris, let's bring you in, Managing Director and Founder at Interchange. As always, we have Gabe here and Melissa here, dissecting the week's theories, debunking the myths of skumped and a man walks into a bar. Gabe, as a business leader, how about this? What has been your approach in implementing workplace flexibility? Let's get back to the topic. As a business leader, what's been your approach?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Look, this is a really interesting time, and I have to say quite an exciting one. We've been talking about flexibility in the workplace for a very, very long time, and I think back to almost 10 years ago where I was working with Telstra on implementing their flexibility for all staff program. And And at the time, that seemed radical and outrageous, and there were so many comments saying it'll never, ever happen, it can't happen, it doesn't work for sales staff to work flexibly, it doesn't work for any leaders to be flexible, or most certainly from working at home. So this is an exciting period where we can challenge a lot of those fixed mindsets. For myself, I guess us transitioning to everybody working from home has been challenging, less so in, I guess, the trust level that leaders feel. I've always thought that it is a good thing for people that can maximise their time by working at home to work at home. I'm certainly not one of those people. I have to say I really enjoy being in the office and being surrounded by people, and the way that I like to work is with lots of energy and lots of activity, and so personally I'm struggling. But from a workplace transition perspective, the thing that we had to change is how do we continue to collaborate, albeit from an isolated standpoint, and that's probably been some of the most challenging things, is how do you use the platforms that are available to us, such as Skype or Teams and Zoom. Sometimes I get confused which one I'm supposed to be on from one meeting to the next. but from a workforce perspective, it's had its benefits. I think certain members of the team are reveling in it. They're enjoying that opportunity to just have quiet and to knuckle down and focus. And for others, it's harder. So, again, I think this is just a fantastic opportunity for organisations to see the great benefit that locational flexibility can offer, because it can actually improve our productivity.
Yeah, okay. It's interesting. So as you know, we've been looking at wellbeing in the last few weeks. We're now starting to move on to leadership, and we're looking certainly at that next week with a couple of senior leaders, executives in our world in Australia. It'll be very interesting to hear that the way that they think. In terms of your own leadership, Gabe, how has your leadership changed, given that you're actually now managing a remote team?
Yeah, well, some of the things that I just have been putting in place, Chris, is to make sure that in addition to the team sessions that we have, that when I do close out for the day and take the dog for a walk, that I just pop the earphones in and call people individually to just check in and see how everything's going, and just to get that social connection, because that's something that we're lacking at the moment. We're not getting that. Normally, when we were in the office, we could stand in the kitchen and make a cup of tea for each other and chat about social, family, what we're watching on TV, how we're feeling. And that is typically something that I really like to do as a leader, and I feel that there's a gap there. So I'm trying to do just telephone check-ins with people to fill that gap. For me, I'd still rather be with people, but I recognise that there is a way around that.
Yeah, okay. And I know an area that we actually have been very busy in at Interchange has been coaching, remote coaching, wellbeing coaching, executive coaching. I know you've been actively involved in this with the majority of our clients. So what are you seeing across those clients in how they are approaching workplace flexibility and leading their teams?
This is a really interesting one, Chris, because I think our different personalities play out more than our leadership. And what I'm hearing quite a bit of is when I'm checking in and saying things like, how's everything going within your team? And some of the answers I'm hearing is, I think everyone's pretty good. You know, I've had a few conversations with some of my team, and they're struggling. Their home dynamic's not so great, and they're feeling, in some instances, unsafe or unproductive, or some kind of negative response. But then when I ask, how are you handling it? There have been quite a few leaders that have said, well, actually, I'm coming to work because there's no one here, so it's safe for me to be at work. And you really do need to challenge that thinking to say, well, is that fair? If your whole team is having to work from home in order to protect the health of our community, is it okay for you then to be going in because you find that to be a more productive way of working? And I think we need to keep calling each other on those things, because it's important to lead from the front and to demonstrate that we all need to make sacrifices and work from home, but also to see the positives in this situation as well. I had a really interesting conversation with somebody the other day talking about wartime and how many women ended up in the workplace because the men were off at war, and how that actually sustained when they returned, because so many women were effective in the work. And sometimes it does take a crisis to be able to demonstrate that a different way can actually be very effective. And I'd really like for us to think about how we can hold on to the good that's come from this and use it moving forward.
Fantastic, Gabe. Thank you. As always, it's so interesting to hear your thoughts on this and to get your perspective on behalf of other business leaders out there who are all trying to manage this crazy, crazy time. Gabe, we're going to come back to you in a second. Thank you very much. Back to me, thanks. Now, the last couple of weeks, look at Double Leopard, she's everywhere. She's everywhere. The last couple of weeks, we've looked at well-being, as I said. Now, you know that an aspect of well-being is to learn something new. Now, what did I get you to do? What did I get you to do? You know it. It was juggle. We're on stage 3 of juggling. I hope you've been practicing, because I'll be really upset if you don't. Now, I'm not being a smarty pants by bringing these 3 things in last week. I just forgot my lemons, and that doesn't mean I've gone crazy, or it doesn't mean anything else. Stage 1 of juggling was pop, 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 just from the center of the palm, if you want to catch up. You know, I really hope I'm creating some jugglers out there, because I'll be really disappointed. Stage 2 was adding a second one in. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. That's a bad noise for the microphone. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. You throw the second one while the first one's in the air. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. You got it? How's my star pupil? Gabrielle? 1 and 1. But that's okay. You give it a go, which is what it's all about. Just give it a go. The last stage, well, you know, you've done 1 and 2, 1 and 2, but then you've got to swap hands. You've got to start with the other hand. 1 and 2, 1 and 2. The last stage is the simple bit. You just add the third one in. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, and you got it! That's juggling for you, everyone. I hope you've done it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thousands of people up there. Woo! Having a good time? I'm embarrassed with myself. That's juggling. I hope you've learned to juggle. That's all it is. Sorry to whoever's biscuits and things I've just crushed in there. But anyway, we're all friends. You'll forgive me, hopefully. Let's move on to our very special guest here today, Professor Anne Bardoel. It's such a pleasure to have you here, Anne. Anne is a Professor of Management at Swinburne University of Technology. She's the course director of the Master of Human Resource Management program and has a national and international reputation as a researcher in the work and family life area. Anne Bardoel, Professor Anne Bardoel, it's such a pleasure to have you here. We are very honoured that you've dedicated your time today. Thank you so much. This is obviously an area of yours that is very dear to your heart, as is Melissa's as well. How about we just go back to the start again for the lay people out there? What are the benefits of workplace flexibility?
Oh, look, there's a range of benefits, Chris. Probably one of the most obvious ones is that you have that ability to control how you connect to the workplace. And that enables you to better balance your work and family needs, and I think another thing, and I've really learnt this since we've been on the COVID lockdown, is it also can give you an opportunity to work when your energy levels are at their best. So I happen to be a more night owl. My husband tends to be somebody who loves getting up at sort of 5 a.m. in the morning. So, you know, if you have flexible work arrangements, you can actually fit into that. We also know, just looking at the research on this, that for those organisations that do and have provided their employees with workplace flexibility, that those employees tend to be more engaged, they're more connected to the organisation, they're more motivated, and you tend to get a reduction in things such as people leaving the organisation or turnover, and things such as absenteeism and tardiness.
It was an interesting time when the lockdown happened, and as a business, you know, we almost were rejoicing in the fact that other organisations were forced to take this on and to think a little bit more openly about how they were going to navigate through this area. Are there potential downsides, however, of workplace flexibility?
Yeah, and I'm somebody like Gabrielle and Melissa who've advocated flexible work arrangements, but I think actually even the title of the session today, Ultra Flexibility, sort of gives you a sense of you know, it's over the top, it's ultra. We're all now working, well, for those of us who are working, and I would like to point out that there are some part of our community who unfortunately aren't able to work, but for those of us who are working, we're now working. It's almost forced flexibility, if you like, forced being able to work at home. And traditionally we think of this as an enlightened policy by our organisations, and we're working at home. But normally we don't have young children there. We're not homeschooling them as well for those who have children. Then there's another group of people who may live by themselves and are feeling quite isolated. So that issue of social isolation is an issue that I think we will need to address. And so working, and one of the, you won't believe this, but there has actually been a study already looking at people's reaction to working in lockdowns. And a couple of things that came out of this, and I'll just go over a couple of them. But one of the things that people were reporting initially was a lack of energy. So when the lockdowns actually started, people, I think it's such an extraordinary time that we're all living at, that people sort of, it was almost like people were sort of being punched in the stomach and sort of, you know, feeling this lack of energy. And when people were asked, well, what was causing that? People were saying, well, we're working at home and we're glad we're working, but the lines between our work and our family life are blurred. So we've often had opportunity to, we tend to have that opportunity to make those boundaries clearer. And I have one of my colleagues at work, you know, he's got 2 young children. He lives in a small a house with 2 bedrooms, and both he and his wife are working. Where just practically, where do you actually, you know, work is an issue that his family are actually dealing with. The other thing that people reported in this initial study was their anxiety had increased. So the anxiety of actually living in a COVID-19 world, they were actually feeling that. And another, I was talking to someone else about this the other day, and he made the point that it's almost like having a low level of post-traumatic stress syndrome going on. And it's got to do with the fact that you can't control it. The other things, people were feeling worried about their businesses that they were working in, whether they would remain to, continue to be profitable. And the other thing that came out of the study was people were being distracted by people, whether it's young children or other people at home. So while there is a lot, I think we and economists would talk about structural shifts, and I know Gabrielle talked about after the Second World War, more women. It was a real impetus for more women being in the workforce. I think this will be a structural shift as well in terms of creating a situation where flexible work arrangements will become more normalised. However, I still think it won't be a 5-day-a-week proposition for most people.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. In case you've joined us late, this is Professor Anne Bardoel, Professor of Management at Swinburne University of Technology, and it's so great to have your thoughts on this issue. Distracted by young people at home. Impossible. What think we've learnt during this process, or even more specifically, what have you learnt? Are there any surprises for you as a result of this process?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that's really confronted me was a need to quickly get on top of all the tools that you have at disposal to be able to communicate with other people in your workplace. And while I knew, I've used Skype before and I've used Zoom before, I never knew how to do a breakout room in Zoom before, being we're teaching online. So I've had to learn that sort of thing. And I think it's forced me, and I suspect other people, to become more competent, but more adept, I should say, at using the technology. And it's certainly improved. I can think of, 10 years ago when you'd have a conference call, there'd be those horrible delays and all of that sort of stuff. The technology has actually improved around that. I totally agree with what Gabrielle's saying. There is still a need for that personal, particularly from a managerial role, still a need for that personal connection as well. And I really like your idea, Gabrielle, of having that one-on-one phone call, or even it might be a Zoom call or whatever, because that's what you miss in this environment that we've got at the moment.
We know that there have been plenty of industries that have been impacted by this. We see some industries just being incredibly innovative during this period.
Yeah.
We're looking at doctors do consultations online. We're looking at church services being run, symphony orchestras online, funeral services being conducted online. What industries do you think have been most impacted by these changes?
I think some of the traditional ways we think about service are going to be impacted. So, for example, the issue of telehealth now, I think that's going to be dramatically increased and will go forward. And particularly when you look at it in the Australian context, we're an ageing population. So you've got a number of elderly people. That is much better way of actually servicing that part of the community. And, I think we'll see a shift to, getting, we've already seen it in the current situation, but people being allowed to, claim Medicare rebates and stuff like that. There are some other sides that I think, other things that I think are going to happen, not necessarily all good. One of the things is, an organisation's going to say, do we need those huge office blocks in cities anymore if we're going towards more tele or remote working profile in terms of our workforce? I suspect not. I think also people there will be a big push in people buying. I mean, people are already been buying consumables on the internet. I think that will increase. So does somebody need to actually go to a store? We've already seen that happening, but I think this structural shift of the COVID-19 might push that forward. But on the positive side, I think one of the things will be just much more comfort with both managers and employees using flexible work arrangements.
And do you believe that there are industries where flexibility will actually never be be applicable?
I think we see it at the moment. Who are the groups in our society who are not working? They're people are predominantly working in service hospitality jobs. It's very difficult to replace the person in those types of situations. However, what I would say, and this is where we need to have more of a debate at a societal level, there is always flexibility with any job. If someone else can fill in for your shift or whatever. I've recently been doing some work with train drivers, and yes, we still need a train driver to actually, drive the train. But the flexibility for that group of people is around their rostering. And we need to think about, does it have to be done this particular way? We've now got much better HR tools in order to be able to do rostering, and so we can provide flexibility in different ways. So I think it's very easy for people who are knowledge workers, traditional white-collar workers who are dealing with information and don't necessarily need to be supervised all the time to have flexible work arrangements. But let's not lose sight of the fact that there are other groups in our community where the flexibility is in a different way. And we need to think about how can that flexibility be enabled for that group of people.
Our special guest today on the 2PM project is Professor Anne Bardoel. She is a Professor of Management at Swinburne University of Technology. Gabe and Melissa, I'm going to bring you guys back in. I wonder while you've been listening to Anne speak, whether you have any questions or questions for each other based on how people have spoken today. What are your thoughts on workplace flexibility?
I'd love to just have a quick discussion with Anne, if I may, about flexible education. I'm finding this to be incredible at the moment as to how we've been able to shift. I've got 3 primary school age children, and how they're now shifting to being, as time goes by, more self-sufficient in their learning. And I'm kind of thinking about this from 2 scales. One is when we do large-scale transformation projects, we have many phases to those transformations, and some of it is face-to-face, a lot of it is not, and people really struggle. But what we've actually trained in, all of us, is we learn when we're in a classroom. And suddenly our children are having a period where they're not in a classroom and they still need to learn. And I'm starting to become really curious about flexible education. You touched on it before when you talked about the universities needing to make the shift. What do you think about secondary and primary education making some changes?
Look, I think it's one of those things. I think we're at a point in time where there will be a shift towards some of those traditional education delivery methods. But there is no substitute for the social relationships and development that occur in a school setting. So while I think we can use the technology, certainly in terms of a way of enabling kids and teenagers to access information, I would hate to see us lose sight of the fact that there's another part, and it's us as humans and connecting with each other, important part. I know, just talking to several of my colleagues, that they're sort of saying things like, "We love our children, but we can't wait till they can go back to school again." So there's that side of it as well.
You won't get that from anyone here, I can assure you.
I'm sure.
Melissa, how about you? Did you have a question you wanted to throw out to the group? I think
Can't
we've
hear
still
you,
got
Mel.
you on mute there, Melissa.
You can't have a call without one of you forgetting to unmute.
All right. I like saying the word mute.
yourself.
Off you go. We can hear you now.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the barriers to more widespread flexibility has been managers' trust. And, we've talked a lot about this as an organisation, interchange, because a lot of the time managers say, I just can't trust people to work from home. What's your perspective around that? Because obviously, as we've talked about, managers have been forced into this situation. So, how do you think people are navigating that relationship of trust?
Oh, it's a really good question, Melissa. One of the things, and I know I just did a project with the group about flexibility, and one of the issues employees will say is, I can't get flexibility because my immediate manager doesn't trust us, or doesn't think I'll do the job, or whatever. What we now is managers are being forced to, for want of a better word, trust their employees because they have to. But the $64 million question is, will this continue? I think it will, but what I think we need to do is think about how we measure the productivity of our employees, and do it in creative ways as well. I'm not necessarily advocating some sort of big brother way, but one of the biggest things about a flexible work program being successful is that we clearly set expectations for employees about what we want them to do. So I think that process of clearly, as managers, clearly setting the goals, clearly setting the expectations of what we want people to do, and managing it, truly managing it, is important. And the management role is more complex. In one sense, it's easy to manage people that are all sitting there in front of you, or you think it is anyway. But now we need to have more diverse skills.
Fantastic, thank you. I'll throw a question out from one of our viewers on YouTube. I'll just throw this out to you guys. So do you think there may be a struggle with what employees have now become accustomed to in regards to working from home and working shorter days and the long-term expectations of the employer? Who wants to have a go at that one?
I'll jump in with my view, but I can only give you really the view of the interchange team and that of the people that I'm coaching at the moment. I think that there will be no real challenge with coming back to work and people contributing in the way that they were contributing before. And in fact, I have a view that as people have moved through this period, whilst it may not be, as Melissa said earlier, signing on at 8:30 and leaving at 5:30, I actually think people have been working incredibly hard over this period, albeit just from a sense of wanting to have security in their roles. We're seeing so many people sadly losing employment, and on the whole, I think people are working incredibly hard right now to demonstrate their value.
Gabrielle, I would absolutely agree with you. I mean, we haven't done any major studies on it, but one thing we know from previous research that's been done on flexibility is, generally speaking, the sort of ideal amount that somebody can work, who's in a full-time job, that is 1 to 2 days, and they're actually more in a flexible work arrangement, and they're actually more productive. So that research has been shown time and time again. What we do find is that when you extend that to 5 days a week, somebody's working flexibly, gosh, I can't say the word, you don't necessarily get that increase in their performance or productivity. I think what we will see is a lot of organisations are going to say, oh, well, this actually works. This actually means people, they don't have the long commute times. And I think that's another thing. Are people going to want to go back to long commute times again? And the cost of doing that, I'm sure people want to come back to work to a certain extent, but do they want to do it 5 days a week again? I suspect not.
It is interesting. There was some, I know that there was a study done from the time of the Gillard government when they were looking at the rollout of the NBN, and there was some massive savings done that was considered, I think, through Access Economics, who predicted that would be a massive $1.5 billion saved, and about 1.3 was in the commute times saved from people going to and from. And I think they were even looking at small proportions of flexible work. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but yeah, just by saving time in the commute, extraordinary. Thank you to all the people who've been putting questions up through Facebook and YouTube. We are running out of time. Unfortunately, we do have time for one last question I'm going to throw out to all of you. It's around your top 3 tips, or maybe top 2. What are your tips to keep a remote team's morale high and engaged? What could you suggest? Experts?
Okay, I'll take a stab at this, Chris. I think as a manager, keep in touch with your people. That's important, but don't overdo it. But make sure that doors are always open. Use the technology that you have in order to, and there's lots of stuff like Teams and Zoom, etc., to actually do that. The second thing I'd say, just at and this is more in terms of our own personal health, is be kind to yourself. Look after yourself. Eat well, get up, and start the day. One of the things I've had to do is force myself to get out of my pajamas every morning. I just make sure that, I don't sit around looking like a complete slob. And that actually, so you sort of think of things in a different way. And the final thing that I would say is it's natural to feel a bit anxious at the moment, and it will end. I don't know when that will be, but this situation will not go on forever, and life won't be exactly the same, but it will end.
Thank you. Anyone else, Melissa or Gabe? Do you have anything to add there? Melissa, how about a top tip from you?
I think, as Anne said, keeping that connection, and also, as we talked about, being really clear about expectations. So you've got to remember that people are at home, they're not having those regular check-ins, they're not able to kind of just sense check, am I on the right track? So, the worst case scenario is someone at home on their own, really not clear on what they're needing to focus on, and feeling pretty lost and isolated. So I think, keeping those connections up, being clear on expectations, making sure you're on the same page, I think that's really important at a time like this.
Fantastic. Thank you. Gabe, top tip?
Yeah, I suppose just I agree with everything that both Anne and Melissa have said. For me, the only additions I'd like to add to that is authenticity and empathy. I think I started out on this process of lockdown trying to pretend I was fine. Each time I spoke to the team, I was like, I'm fine. In the desire to make sure everybody else felt secure and okay. And I think as time has gone on, I have recognised actually it's better for the team, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm actually just really authentic about what's going on for me and my family and how I'm feeling, and albeit as the leader of a business, be authentic about all of those emotions, because it just normalizes it for people. And then the other piece being the empathy, to try and really understand what's going on for them. And the more authentic you are, the more likely you are to be able to get an understanding as to what's happening for them, to allow for that empathy.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, our special guest speaker today, Anne Bardoel. Thank you so much to Melissa Giles and Gabrielle Harris. We're going to leave it there. It's been a great conversation today. How fascinating. And how fascinating, I imagine, for people who've actually been involved in this work pre-coronavirus and then seeing it play out. It must be quite extraordinary. Top tips. You heard it first here on the 2 p.m. project. That's what you get. Don't say you don't learn anything here. My top tip, be good to yourself. Be good to others as well. Otherwise, you might get, and imagine that would be terrible. So we don't want that to happen. Let's move on to our very special guest musician. Oh boy. Musical guest today, ELLIOTT WESTON, is a singer, songwriter and performer for Sydney indie band WELTER. If you've walked past a Sydney pub in the last 25 years, you would have heard these boys belting out a couple of songs from the front bar, no doubt. Having released 3 high-aimed indie albums, the group now focuses their energy on marketing their music online and have found a whole new audience, from my understanding, around the world. Combining their other life's passion, wine, that's easy. The band all have day jobs in the wine industry. Their WELTER wine and song house concerts have been hugely successful in the time prior to COVID-19. ELLIOTT WESTON has also toured nationally and internationally, playing the Big Bopper in Buddy, the Buddy Holly story, and he has fronted classic Oz rock band Matt Finish. ELLIOTT WESTON, come in. Hello, buddy. Can you hear me?
Look what I found, Chris.
It's a bit late now. Do you reckon? I mean,
there's another one. Oh, there's one here.
Can you show me? Have you been watching the last 3? Hey. I thought Gabe was a star student. There's the star student right there. Look at that guy. Hey, he only just picked him up a couple of minutes ago. That's the power of my teaching. ELLIOTT WESTON, what a great thrill to have you here. The big vocal lungs of the Tasmanian, the boy from Hobart. Started as a busker on the street, and you know your vocal range has not changed. It's got bigger, if anything. I can say this because I was actually part of a private online show that Elle did last night on Zoom for a bunch of VIPs, of which I count myself one of those. It was brilliant, Elle. It was fantastic to have you play. The highlight being that you played one of your songs from Sydney with another guy who was actually in the Blue Mountains in Blackheath, playing at the same time. It was extraordinary. Sorry, I just got completely lost in the memory of that. It's it's a great time to be selling wine, I imagine. I don't know.
I'll bring the lemons back, mate.
It's a great time to be selling wine. Alcohol sales are up 300%, but I imagine it's not so great to be creating music, or is it? I mean, how creative do you feel? I ask this question of all the musical acts that come on board. How are you going at the moment, and the band, in terms of your creativity?
Well, obviously everybody's got the lockdown challenge, and lots of my muso and actor mates are all out of work, and gigs have totally dried up, and our house concerts have all been put aside. But as everybody was talking about, it's connecting with our team. So my band, as we love to call it in the muso industry, we've been connecting in different ways and getting on top of the technology. And I must admit, I'm not a genius as far as technology goes, but thankfully I'm stepping through it, and I'm sort of diving into all this new technology, the Zooms and the conference equipment. And also we've been doing, having fun, using this thing called an iPhone. So I've been recording myself playing a song, and then I'll upload it to my drummer, and he'll record his drums on iPhone, and then we'll pass it over to the other musos, and they'll do the same, and then we'll put it all together. And we've done some iPhone ISO recordings, which have been proved pretty special. So yes, we're all sort of delving into this new technology and embracing it, I think.
Well, we actually have an example.
But sorry, getting back to your initial question, as for creativity, I haven't written any sort of "I'm so alone" songs yet, you know, and woe is me, oh dear, how am I going to get out of this isolation? And look, there's lots of that on the internet and lots of rewrites, and I'm really having a good laugh. But it's always a story that I'm looking for, and I haven't seen in these four walls that I've been. This is my laundry / studio / man cave that I've been isolated in for the last 4 or 5 weeks. I haven't seen any stories sort of crop up that really capture my imagination.
Well, you mentioned the iPhone ISO recordings. We do have an example of that. I know you've been putting this out through your website, through WELTER Music, and on your Facebook page. Let's see, it's just a short example of what ELLIOTT's talking about. This is WELTER and Lindisfarne. The bells of Lindisfarne ring out over the river. The bells of Lindisfarne will one day deliver me from here. I go as free man, walk up to the tower and ring those bells. I go as a free man, walk up to the tower and ring those bells, ring those bells. I don't know, Al. I think someone in the band is technically proficient, because that looks pretty smooth to me.
The most important thing about that is we all shot against the same white backdrop. It was just luck.
It looks like you're looking at each other. I don't know. I was mesmerised by it. So I know that this is a difficult time particularly for performing arts and for the industry as a whole. Do you reckon that there's any upside or any potential benefit to the current situation as an artist?
Yes, I do. And I think we've always been an independent band, and we looked at signing our music away, publishing away in the 90s and early 2000s, but we've always stayed fiercely independent. And we've been going online and Facebook marketing and connecting with our audience internationally for the last 5 years, and it's proved very successful. And for us, we're very lucky that everybody's now looking at so much more Facebook and has so much more time to connect outside of their normal environments. So it's proving pretty successful for us. But as I think I can extrapolate that out to all performers, because most performers I know run their careers as sole traders, and those, so they're going to look at the lessons that and take charge of their careers because they have to. And you know, there's so much what does an actor do when they're not acting? Well, they pour coffee, or you know, they serve you coffee, or they serve you at the bar. Well, there's a lot of other things that they can do too, and I think they're discovering that with the online the tools that are available to everybody now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Elliott. This is Elliott Weston, singer-songwriter from the Sydney indie band WELTER. I must declare I'm a big fan of this band. Elle, can you tell us a little bit about the song you're going to play today, and then you can just launch into it, my friend?
Yeah, thank you. Sure you want a bit more juggling?
Nah, leave the juggling to me, and the studio audience seem to love it.
Storm Damage. This song is called Storm Damage, and I wrote it about a client of mine who I've known for many years, and he was hit by Cyclone Debbie, you know, that cyclone that came through Queensland a few years back. And I was amazed by him and his wife's resilience to being absolutely devastated and how they came back. But the most amazing thing was I think that their resilience was derived from their relationship and the strength of their relationship. So I think resilience comes from the people around you. And I'm repurposing a term that we hear all the time, herd immunity. Everybody's talking about our herd immunity. Well, herd immunity, I think for me, is about the people around me. I'm immune to these storms that come through if I have great people around me. And so that's where I get my herd immunity from, is my connection to my band and my friends and my family. So this one's a Storm Damage, or as some of the fans call it, Storm Cabbage for some reason. I've got no idea where that comes from. Storm damage, somehow we'll make it through. Somehow we'll manage. Where to leave that's the clue. Picking up all the broken pieces. How the hell they ever fit. Storm damage, don't say you're gonna quit. Oh, when you hold me, I can feel you breaking too. When you hold me, I can't help but love you. Storm damage, I just can't go by the book. Shattered self-image. No one stops to take a look. Rivers of over the main road out. All the trees are lying down. Storm damage, no chance to leave this town. Oh, when you hold me, I can feel you breaking too. When you hold me, I can't help but love you. I love you. Look for some through the dark clouds. Help is kind of on its way. Storm damage, we'll get through this okay. Oh, when you hold me, I can feel you breaking too. When you hold me, I can't help but love you.
Fantastic. Elliott Weston. Woo! Wonderful, wonderful sound, El. It's so great to hear you play. I know you just said that you've learned what an iPhone is. An iPhone just learned what you were as well. You're testing the limits of the audio on that iPhone with that big voice of yours. Thank you so much for you playing here today, Elliott Weston, lead singer of Sydney band WELTER. Thank you also to our special guest speaker, Professor Anne Bardoel. Anne is a Professor of Management at Swinburne University of Technology and is the Course Director of the Master of Human Resource Management program. Thank you, Anne. It was so great to hear your thoughts on the current situation. I really appreciate the time that you've given us today. Thank you also to our house band, Elliott Weston, frontman for indie band WELTER. Links to find WELTER's music, and I would also recommend booking a WELTER Wine and Song house concert for when all this madness disappears. Put your name down now. Links will be on our web pages at the end of this broadcast. Thank you also to my Interchange colleagues, Gabrielle Harris and Dr. Melissa Giles. Thanks, Gabe. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks so much for your time here today. We will see you again next week, as always. Finally, thanks to Double Leopard, Emma Grace. She's in single leopard today. It's great. Oh, that was quick. That was very quick. The show was produced by Emma, and Emma was produced by her mum. To make sure you don't miss an episode of the 2 p.m. Project, be sure to subscribe to receive the free weekly link in your inbox. You can subscribe on our website, interchange.com.au. There will also be links on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. Thanks for watching, people. It's been a really interesting episode. As I mentioned earlier in the show, we can customize this show for your business, as we are doing for a couple of other businesses. We create a show specifically for you and your team. We have musical guests from within your business and talk about the things that you want to discuss. We're looking forward to seeing you again for another episode of the 2 p.m. Project next Friday at 2 p.m. In the meantime, stay safe. Chris Kabadi is my name. See you next week.